In the shadows of Seattle's bustling streets lurked a predator so prolific, he would become known as America's most lethal serial killer. Gary Leon Ridgway, the infamous Green River Killer, turned the picturesque Pacific Northwest into a hunting ground, leaving a trail of death that would haunt the region for decades. Born on February 18, 1949, in Salt Lake City, Utah, Ridgway's troubled childhood foreshadowed the horrors to come. Witnessing domestic violence, Ridgway had a bedwetting problem until he was 13, and his mother would forcefully wash his genitals after every episode. He would later tell defense psychologists that, as an adolescent, he had conflicting feelings of anger and sexual attraction toward his mother and fantasized about killing her. Ridgway's murderous tendencies emerged early. At 16, he led a 6-year-old boy into the woods and stabbed him, a chilling precursor to the atrocities that would follow. According to women in his life, Ridgway had an insatiable sexual appetite. His 3 ex-wives and several ex-girlfriends reported that he demanded sex from them several times a day. Often, he would want to have sex in a public area or in the woods. Ridgway graduated from Tyee High School in 1969 and married his 19-year-old high school girlfriend, Claudia Craig. He joined the United States Navy and was sent to Vietnam, where he served on board a supply ship and saw combat. During his time in the military, Ridgway had frequent sexual intercourse with sex workers and contracted gonorrhea. Although angered by this, he continued this activity without protection. Between 1982 and 1998, Ridgway embarked on a killing spree that would claim at least 48 lives, though he would later claim to have murdered as many as 71 women near Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. His victims were primarily young women in vulnerable situations, sex workers and runaways who disappeared along the Pacific Highway south. Ridgway's modus operandi was as brutal as it was efficient. He would gain his victims' trust, sometimes using a photo of his son to appear harmless. They would engage in sexual activity, and after minutes of intercourse from behind, Ridgway would wrap his forearm around the front of their necks and use the other arm to pull back as tightly as he could, strangling them. He killed most victims in his home, his truck, or a secluded area. The bodies were then dumped in wooded areas around the Green River, earning him his infamous moniker. What made Ridgway's crimes particularly chilling was his seeming ability to lead a double life. By day, he was a long-time employee at a truck factory as a painter, even becoming religious during his second marriage. By night, he was a predator with an insatiable appetite for violence. The body of Ridgway's first known victim was found in July 1982. A unique kind of spray paint was found on clothing wrapped around the victim's neck, but the paint was not tested for 20 years. If it had been tested at the time, it would have been easier to link the murder to Ridgway. For nearly 2 decades, Ridgway eluded capture, despite being a suspect as early as 1983. It wasn't until 2001 that advances in DNA technology finally linked him conclusively to several victims. On November 30, 2001, as Ridgway left his job at the Kenworth truck factory, police moved in to make the arrest that would end his reign of terror. In a shocking turn of events, Ridgway struck a plea deal in 2003, confessing to 48 murders to avoid the death penalty. The courtroom fell silent as he pleaded guilty to more confirmed murders than any other American serial killer in history. In exchange for his cooperation in locating victims' remains, Ridgway was sentenced to 48 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus 480 years, which he is currently serving at Washington State Penitentiary.